The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around the subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome to episode 82 of The Things We All Carry. Tom Mitchell's a hero. I don't throw that title around often or easily, but in this case, it's the truth. Better known as Tattoo Tom, Tom is a self-described and appropriately anointed, aggressive, and unapologetic activist for children with cancer and their families. From a personal tragedy was born a dogged determination to do basically anything and everything for these kids and their families. From becoming a boxer at the age of 39 to participating in the Moab 240 to dedicating space on his own skin for the memory of children lost to this disease, Tom has made himself the ultimate advocate. He founded Stillbrave to provide non-medical supportive care to children with cancer and their families. The organization does that and so much more. Parents of children with cancer are overwhelmed with the diagnosis. Tom and Stillbrave are there to help. That help can be monetary, emotional, guidance with terms and procedures, or simply a chance to smile. This show is a first responder-centered podcast, and it may seem odd to have Tom as a guest. Trust me, the connection is there. Last September, I recorded with Loren, a firefighter in my area. She's also a childhood cancer survivor and a board member of Stillbrave. A few months ago, I found out that a good friend, coworker, and in all but blood, a brother of mine was embarking on a cancer journey of his own. His infant son had been diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, and the family needed all the help they could get. My first call was to Loren. That's all it took, one call. Loren, Tom, and Stillbrave jumped in and offered money, advice, and an ear. I'm indebted to them for their help they gave so easily and generously. Listen to Tom's story, hear the ugly truths about cancer and the treatments, understand how little is spent on research, find a way to do your part in this battle. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show.
I got cleaning and grass cutting, yard work stuff to do. Not in a hurry to get to.
Good deal. All right. So if you're ready, if you're comfortable, let's have a conversation.
Okay.
All right. Welcome back to The Things We All Carry. Today, I'm kind of stepping out of the box a little bit. My guest today is Tattoo Tom Mitchell. That's what he's known as, and you can look at him a little bit, and you'll figure out why he's called Tattoo Tom. And he is a self-described, aggressive, and unapologetic activist for children with cancer and their families. Did you get that correct, Tom?
That's right. That's correct.
He's also the founder and director of Stillbrave Childhood Cancer Foundation, and it's an awesome foundation who has touched the lives of a couple of people that I know, one that's very close to me, and one that was a guest on my show. Her name was Loren, and you can go back in the old episodes and find her episode where she talks about her involvement with Tom and all that he's done. And I just made sense to talk to him and kind of get his word out there, get his story out there, and just touch base a little bit and let people know what's going on behind the scenes in some of these cases. And I just felt that it was the right fit. So welcome and good morning, Tom.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you showing the interest in Stillbrave and what we do. Yeah,
I think it's fantastic. And I know that I'm sitting here with one of your shirts on, and we'll get to what the meaning behind it is, but it says Stillbrave Renegade. And he's going to get into his story about why he calls people that kind of help and follow renegades, because I think it's impactful and you should hear it. First, I want to ask him, and I know he's going to have a pretty good answer for me because I follow him on social media and I know what his pastimes are a little bit. What's the last song you listened to?
So the very last song I listened to was a cover song that a fellow named Billy Strings did. It's called Picking Up the Pieces.
A fella, huh? Yeah.
A fella named Billy Strings. Yeah, I was heading back from getting my morning coffee and it came on my radio station. It was Picking Up the Pieces, which is a cover that he does. But it's just a really good song. In all likelihood, anytime you ask me that question, my answer probably is going to be some Billy String song. He seems to be where my musical tastes are wavering currently at the moment.
Now, was he or the Jason Isbell concert at Wolf Trap, was that the last show you've been to?
Yeah, the last show I went to was Jason Isbell.
Okay.
Prior to that, I had gone to 11 Billy String shows. While I was up in New England visiting children with cancer and their families, and training a little bit for this ultra marathon that I'm running. But also while I was up there, I saw 11 Billy Strings concerts as well while I was gallivanting around New England.
Well, you packed your time in there. So that's fantastic. And if my audience, and I don't know if much of my audience has been introduced to Billy Strings, if you haven't, go check him out. You will be blown away by his guitar work and his music. And I think the way I was introduced to him, and maybe this is appropriate for everyone to get a feel for him, is go to YouTube and Google or search out, Dust in a Baggie, and see him as a young kid sitting in an old ratty living room playing for his friends, and you'll be blown away by the speed and finesse of his fingers as he plays the guitar.
Yeah, I think a lot of people came to Billy Strings by way of that video during COVID. That video was being posted a lot. We were all, in our houses trying to find something to do to keep ourselves occupied. I was making beef jerky. I was, doing all kinds of stuff, trying to stay busy. And I stumbled upon that video and one other video, and that was my introduction to him. And he's pretty talented. He's one of those guitar players that's, a once in a generation type player. He's so talented and such a kind, humble, genuine person as well. I mean, he's a real attractive person in his demeanor, aside from his musical, magnitude. He's just a really good dude. I've met him personally, and he helped me out with this little club thing. We talked about that a little bit later. This little club thing that I run through Stillbrave. He's now a member of that club, which we use to help children with cancer by saying, look, we've got Billy Strings in the club, we've got Skip Wild in the club, and so it makes the kids feel like they're really part of something. And Billy was more than willing to join my club when I told him what it was and what we were doing. He's a good dude. That's all I can say. Plus, his music is so good.
It's phenomenal. It'll leave you speechless watching him play.
That being said, though, I definitely enjoyed the Jason Isbell show too. Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good performer as well.
Oh, he's an awesome performer. It's a different vein of music, but he's definitely he holds his own. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, my musical tastes run the gambit from. I mean, if you saw my playlist, it would look like somebody threw up all over the Spotify. My musical tastes are pretty eclectic, but I think it's the nature of my.
I think my Spotify algorithm has schizophrenia, so it's okay.
Yeah,
I understand completely.
Oh, mine definitely.
Yeah,
for sure.
So where'd you grow up, Tom?
So I was born in Maryland and spent probably about first 10, 11 years of my life up and around in Maryland. My parents got divorced when I was very, very young. And so my mom moved around a bunch. I had spent most of my life in Prince George's County, Maryland. Which not at the time, not the best, parts of town, but, I learned a lot about living and a lot about life. But then my parents, my mom and my stepfather got married and we moved to Virginia when I was about 11 or 12. So I spent most of the rest of my life in Virginia, growing up in the Tysons, Vienna, Loren area in Virginia.
So that's about as native as you can get in that area.
Oh, I'm definitely, I'm definitely, I'm a DMV native for sure, but to Northern Virginia particularly. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about maybe growing up, but where you went after high school and all that. I'm not, you and I haven't really we've never spoken before. I've just kind of followed your story a little bit, and I don't know any depth to your story. So what was childhood, teenage, college? What was all that like? Did you go to, what did you do?
So that's the whole can of worms there. So grew up in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Interesting time to be alive. It was a fast, aggressive growing up period. We call ourselves, people my age sort of call ourselves the Gen X or Generation X. And it was a lot of us that were forced to grow up really soon. We were latchkey kids. We were letting ourselves in and out of the house at 6, 7 years old after school, cooking our own dinner. And things were a lot different back then than it is today, with helicopter parents and stuff like that. So I think, I grew up really fast. My parents divorced when I was pretty young. My dad was, pretty absent from my life. And so, taught myself how to grow old. And my stepdad came into my life. He's a great guy. one of my favorite people in the world. He taught me a lot, taught me about living, he taught me a lot about life, taught me a lot about what was important. One of the things that I like to always mention when I talk about my stepdad, when I was a kid and I was in school, he used to make me read 1 hour every day. Didn't matter what it was. I could read a comic book. I could read a newspaper. I could read the TV guide. He didn't care, provided I read something at least 1 hour every day. And I'd have to sit up in the reading room. We didn't have cell phones and stuff back then, but I had to sit up in the reading room quiet for 1 hour. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to my stepfather for that, because not only did he, impress upon me the importance of having a solid vocabulary, the importance of learning, a lot about a lot. And again, this was before the internet. This was before you could Google stuff, so I would read, comic books, but I'd also read the encyclopedia and dictionaries and books of fiction and nonfiction books and all these things. And then I'd find myself being in this room, instead of reading for an hour, I'd be reading for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. You get sucked into some of these books and their adventures and their journeys that you go on with these characters. And today, a lot of what I do is public speaking. And I'm grateful to my stepfather, because I think, again, like I said, I think my vocabulary is better. I think my intellect even is better for just having delved into this thing. So one of the things that I always am grateful to my stepfather for having, I want to say forced me to do, but, it wasn't long after I wasn't feeling forced. It was something I enjoyed doing. And today, prior to starting this recording, you asked me about a book recommendation. I was like, oh man, I got a book, because I love reading. And what's really great today is, you can get access to all the information at your fingertips. The internet is like a gazillion encyclopedias in one. Unfortunately, most people spend their time looking at pictures of cats. And don't get me wrong, I love my cats. I got 4 cats. But I love, I'll sit in front of my computer and just learn stuff and absorb stuff. And I think, like I said, I think that came from my stepfather. And so I'm forever grateful to him for that.
It was
but anyways,
not to interrupt. Well, actually, yes, to interrupt. Yeah. I'm sorry. It was funny. I was talking about this the other day. I was talking about the fact that it's so easy to get, this is a very basic idea, but it's so easy to get updates and highlights of sports games. Everyone knows, as you can tell by the hats, I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm a diehard Red Sox fan, but I was a Red Sox fan growing up in Florida. And at that time, because we're of the same era, at that time, you didn't have these highlights. And so all you had was a newspaper, but that newspaper didn't show up until after you got home from school. And so I would rush home from school, grab the newspaper and scour the box scores and scour the articles and read whatever I could read about. And then even then it was, if they had a West Coast trip, you didn't have the scores in the morning paper because right. it didn't end soon enough to make the deadline.
Right. So yeah, I grew up a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. And back then I used to sit with my old spinster. He had this great aunt. And we would sit and listen to the games at the radio, and she would have her notebook and she would keep all the stats and she'd pass them around to the neighbor. Like, here's the coolest thing, And now, like, she probably turned over in the grave if she knew how easy it was to access, the live updates and the live stats. I mean, you could get, stuff, everything is at your fingertips. And I think today's generation takes that for granted a little bit, but I don't, man. I absorb that. So I love that. I love anything.
It's funny you say that, because I have this every season. The one sports package I buy is an MLB package, and quite often I listen to the radio broadcast instead of watch the TV broadcast, just because I can have it on wherever I go.
Right.
So it's funny you mentioned the radio.
Yeah, my aunt loved it, man. Every time ball game was on, she would sit at the kitchen table and she'd keep her own stats and she'd write down every hit, every RBI. She'd pass that information around to the neighbors who couldn't listen to the game. She was like the local internet, it was funny. I miss her. She's a cool old lady.
She was ahead of her time.
For sure. And, but anyway, so grew up, hard and fast, and it was the 80s. So, I saw my fair share of trouble, and, like a lot of kids during that time, I got into some things where I shouldn't have, and traveled and did stuff at way too young an age and grew up really fast. But, looking back on it, I don't regret any of it. I think that it helped to mold and shape me into the person that I am today. I mean, there's certainly, like anybody's life, things you wish you could go back and do differently or whatever. But I've got to the point in my life where I'm so happy with who and what I am today that I realized, had any one thing been different, then I might not be who and what I am today. So I try to make friends with all those ghosts and and skeletons from the past because they helped mold and shape me into who I am today. Went to high school and at Marshall High School in I guess Tyson's Falls Church area is what they call it. And I was not the best student in the world, unfortunately. I'm really smart and I love to learn, but I don't much like to go to school. And I mostly definitely did not like being told what to do. So in the 10th grade, I was asked to leave. And I did, but I went on and got my GED like the next day. I didn't even study for it. I just went, took the test and crushed the test and started taking classes at Nova at like 17 years old. And I took a bunch of classes and then just started working. I'm a real worker bee, like I always have been. I've always had jobs since I was 14 years old. I lied about my age, got a job at a seafood restaurant, went on to own a gazillion little companies of my own, starting with a landscaping business. And I was a t-shirt screen printer. I mean, I could spend the rest of the podcast telling you all the weird jobs I've had over the years, but just started working and trying new things. And I would get a job and I would go as far as I could in that job. And then I'd get bored and then I'd try something else, I became really, well-rounded in the things that I learned and the people that I met. And I was really fortunate to grow up in the area that I did because it was very culturally mixed, very ethnic and culturally mixed, diverse area with all of the diplomats and all of the people that come into Washington, D.C. For a variety of reasons. I got to meet some amazing people and get exposed to some amazing cultures and lifestyles and ethnicities and stuff like that, man. And man, it really helped to mold and shape me again into the person that I am today. And I'm super, super grateful, for having been afforded that opportunity in the area that I grew up in, for sure.
So you have numerous jobs, numerous endeavors as a young man.
Right.
What would you say was your thing then? Can you encapsulate it? What was it? Was that the thing? Was bouncing around a little bit?
I think for sure bouncing around was definitely the thing. Like, wearing a lot of masks and wearing a lot of uniforms and doing and trying new things. Like I said, I would take a job as a dishwasher. And the next thing you know, I'd be a sous chef at that restaurant. And then I'd be bored and I'd go on to something else, and I'd start out, sweeping floors. And next thing you know, I'd be at this other high position in the company. And I just was a real student of learning and a real student of absorbing and stuff like that. And I studied a lot of, obviously music is a theme that runs through my life. I saw a gazillion Grateful Dead songs in the 80s, or Grateful Dead shows in the 80s, followed them around much the same way I do Billy Strings. I'm a real student of religion and culture, and I've read books and studied all of the, profound doctrines and dogmas and canons of, all the religions of the world. I've studied them ad nauseum, just trying to learn as much as I can about what makes humans tick and why I'm here and what makes me tick and things like that. So part of that was, you had to support yourself and you had to make a living. So I would take jobs that I thought were exciting and new. And then I'd get bored or I'd get fired or something, and I'd move on to something else. But that was definitely my jam was moving around and trying new things. I wasn't very stable. I wasn't stationary at any one place. I get bored very easily. I need a lot of sensory input to keep me stimulated and keep me going, which is, can be a hindrance sometimes, but if you can satiate that and satisfy that, I mean, it's really not that bad because you absorb it and you learn so much. And so that's what I did, and I met, this will probably segue directly into Stillbrave and what I do. Perfect. I met my daughter Shayla's mother when I was 19. I was working at a place called American Medical Laboratories. And this was one of the weirdest jobs I ever had. I worked in the histology department, and my job was when a hospital or a clinic or a doctor's office would do a procedure and remove a piece of tissue from somebody's body, they would send it to the medical lab, to the histology department, which is the study of tissue, to be analyzed, made into slides, and read by the pathologist to see if there would, some things were cancerous or whatever the case may be. And so my job, weird as it sounds, was to log in these specimens as they came into the medical lab every night. So I would log them in, label them, pass them on to the pathologist. The pathologist would then go on to embed them in wax and make slides out of them and determine if they were cancerous and things like that. But what was really funny is that, these things would come in buckets, like Kentucky Fried Chicken buckets, and you never knew what was going to be in there when you opened it up. It could be a colon, it could be, you just never knew. It was the weirdest stuff in the world. And then my job, once the pathologists had done their job, my job was then to dispose of the tissue. So I would have to separate them from the formaldehyde, and I'd have these big, like carts of human tissue that I'd have to take down to the incinerator. Anyways, long story short, there was this woman, and her name was Kim, and she worked the night shift, and she was a medical transcriptionist. And anyway, one thing led to another, and we started talking, we fell in love, and she wound up being the mother of my oldest daughter, Shayla. And Shayla's my daughter who passed away from cancer. That led to me starting Stillbrave and led to the pathway that I'm traveling down today. So that all happened at this really weird job I had when I was 19 years old.
So you meet her mom at 19, and do you guys? How long before you meet? How long after you meet her do you have Shayla?
So it probably was about 3 years after I met Kim that Shayla was born. Okay, I was like 22. I was pretty young.
You're a young parent.
Yeah, Kim was older. It was kind of funny. Kim was a little bit older than me, and she had a daughter from a previous marriage who was like, I love her today. I still speak to her. Her name is Darla. I still speak to her every Father's Day. She messages me on birthdays. I mean, she's a great kid. But so I became a stepdad really kind of early before Shayla was born. And then Shayla and Darla actually share the same birthday, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's probably about 3 years after we met that Shayla was born. And then I was all of a sudden I was a dad, and still like, still living a rough and ruckus life to a lot of degrees. So maybe not best dad in the world at that time, but I was a dad and I was trying my best. I was a young kid and I was trying my best. Later on in life, after Shayla was diagnosed, she came to live with me full time. Her mom was also really sick. And so Shayla came to live with me one time. We had a lot of very candid conversations about, my being a father to her and what kind of father I was. And suffice it to say at the, a couple of days, I mean, this may be jumping ahead, but a couple of days before my daughter passed away, she sent me a text and she said, you've turned out to be the best dad in the world. Mm. And so I was given an opportunity later in life to sort of amend that relationship that was a little strained at the beginning, largely due to just my ignorance. I didn't know back then what was important the way that I do today. But I was, again, afforded an opportunity to amend that relationship. And, when you amend a relationship, it's not like, saying you're sorry. It doesn't have anything to do with that. Saying I'm sorry is kind of a weak comment in a lot of regards. But when you make amends, when they amend the Constitution, they change it to make it better. Right. To make it more just. And when they amend a business deal or whatever, they change it to make it better. And so I was afforded an opportunity to change my relationship with my daughter and make it better. And I'm very, very grateful, for that opportunity. And like I say, she and I had a lot of very candid conversations because she was 16 when she was diagnosed. So she was old enough to have those kind of conversations. And so we had some very, very candid gut level conversations about life. And when she passed away, there was nothing left to be said, and I can move on with the rest of my life feeling confident that she approved of me and what happened. And so that's a great big deal. I'm really lucky that way. You try to pull as a father, I guess any parent who lost a child, you try to pull as much good from those scenarios as possible because it's hard to find it sometimes, right? Like it's hard to accept the unacceptable and find something good in something so shitty. But you'd be surprised how you can find beauty in things that aren't pretty if you look hard enough. Mm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
I wanted to piggyback on that, the young father thing. I was a young dad. My daughter was born when I was 20. And you're right. You don't know what you don't know when you're 20 years old trying to be a parent, especially if you, as you and I share in common, my dad was out of the house at an early age, and it was a very rough and tumble relationship to the day he died. And I didn't learn how to be a parent from him, but I did learn how not to be a parent from him. And I tried to do all the things I tried not to do all the things he did, but that doesn't mean I was a good parent. And sometimes you don't find that out till later. You go, oh, wait, I did fuck up. Wait a second. And then you're right. You have to start making those amends. And I mean, I still do it to today, and I still have to make amends, So it's not an easy road to be a parent at all, but it's even harder road to be that young parent, not knowing how to do it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that very similar situation. I grew up with a stepfather who was in my life and impressed upon me some stuff, but he was always my stepfather. So there was always that, fuck you, you're not my dad. Yeah. Like there's always that tension, right? So, but my real father, he's a deadbeat, and he never modeled for me, what it is to be a father. So I, like you just said, I had to learn a lot about what not to do. Right. And so today, looking back, like I'm really grateful for that guy, because I became a good father by virtue of him being a shitty one.
Right.
And although it was a long road, just like we talked about, I might not be as good a father if I had not had, because growing up, I was, and when I became a father, I was so determined to be so different than him that while I was still screwing up and still not getting it completely dialed in, I was doing a pretty damn good job. I was showing up, and that's the important part. I tell everybody 99% of what Tattoo Tom does is he shows up. I just wing the rest. I have no idea what I'm doing, man. I have no idea. It's all about the showing up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because how many people don't show up?
Right.
And that's the key, man, because I've got, my dad never showed up for me, never. And that was the one thing I was determined to do. And, I have other children today, and they yell and bitch at me about different things. I mean, kids always look at their parents through funny lenses. But at the end of the day, I know that I show up for my kids, and my kids know that I show up for them. And if something's going on or whatever, they know they can call me. And it's not, I think I saw this cheesy meme on Facebook one time that said, I don't want my kids to get in trouble and be like, oh my God, my dad's going to be so mad at me. I want my kids to get in trouble and be like, oh my God, I got to call my dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Either to brag about it or to ask for help.
Yeah. And that's the key to being a good parent, I think, man. It's just is navigating that, that sort of safety, giving your kids an opportunity to feel safe and to feel loved and to feel seen and to feel heard. And if you screw everything else up, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Those are the important things.
Well, let's talk about Shayla a little bit. You said you found out she was sick at age 16, correct?
Yeah. So yeah, kind of a tough story to tell, but I've told it a lot, so I'll get through it. I got a phone call from her, and she said, Dad, I'm not feeling so good. I think I might have a sinus infection or something. Is there any way you could take me to the doctors? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll pick you up. We'll go to the doctors. We'll go to the urgent care clinic. I'm sure it's no big deal. Get you some antibiotics. And then we can grab some dinner afterwards if you feel up to it. Well, it turns out, though, that her sinus infection was not a sinus infection. We got to the urgent care clinic, and they took a chest x-ray, and there was a tumor in her chest that was so big, it was taking up 2/3 of her chest, and it had caused one of her lungs to collapse. So her trouble breathing and her trouble, everything was directly related to this huge tumor. And, with a 16-year-old kid, her mom, of course, was taking her for her annual checkups, but they don't do scans or check for cancer in a 16-year-old kid, So this thing was just left to get really big. And unfortunately, when that day came and that diagnosis came down, it was stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is pretty serious. It's a pretty advanced stage for any cancer, stage 4. And while Hodgkin's lymphoma is I have to be really careful how I say this, is a treatable cancer, and a lot of children do recover and go into remission from it. There's no rhyme or reason to any cancer treatment. 2 children with the same cancer, the same stage, receiving the same treatment protocol, the same medicine, one will live and one will die. Nobody can explain why. And that's a rabbit hole that if we went down, you'd see my face get really red and I'd start warming up behind my collar because I'm very frustrated about that. But anyway, so, we got the diagnosis and the doctors, asked me, they said, do you want to tell her or do you want us to tell her? And so I knew that that was my job. Intuitively, I knew that that was my job. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. It's a very difficult conversation to have. So I went to the mall down from the hospital. There's a shopping mall. And I was just walking around thinking about everything and nothing and how I was going to have this conversation. And I stumbled into this Native American Indian store where they sold jewelry and moccasins and artwork and, really beautiful pottery and stuff like that from Native American tribes from around the country. And I came upon these 2 bracelets, and I'm wearing mine today. It's this big, thick silver feather bracelet. And also next to it was a small feminine version. So I started thinking, the wheels started churning, and I got this idea. So I bought both the bracelets, and I went back to the hospital, and I sat down next to her, and she was scared. She knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And she's, "What's going on, Dad? What's going on?" And so I started talking to her, and I talked to her about feathers and how sometimes birds lose feathers and feathers get blown around in the wind and stuff like that. I talked to her about the importance of being brave. And then that conversation eventually segued into cancer. And I told her about her diagnosis. And I also at that time told her that just like these feather bracelets, we had been blown together and that her and I were going to get through this together. And the only thing we had to do was stay brave. And so I said, no matter what, I'm going to make you 3 promises. And the first promise was that no matter how many nights she had to stay in the hospital, I would stay with her. And the second promise was that as long as she stayed brave, so would I. And the third promise was that I would continue to wear this bracelet every day until she got better. So I'm here to tell it to you. I kept all 3 of those promises. She stayed in the hospital hundreds of nights, probably, through the course of her 1.5-year treatment, maybe 250 nights we were in the hospital. It was always something. And I stayed with her every night. There were exception of a couple of nights where we had a family friend that would stay with her, but there was always somebody there with, and I stayed 99.99% of the nights with her. And I stayed brave. And although my daughter never recovered from that cancer, I still continued to wear this bracelet every day because I promised her I would until she got better. And she didn't get better. So I'm not going to break that promise, So in my mind, I've kept all 3 of those promises. It was a long, tumultuous treatment. She had every complication you can imagine. And this is where I learned a lot about cancer and treatment in the United States of America, because I was under the misconception that perhaps you are and many of your listeners are, is that we live in the greatest country in the world, right? So surely we have the most state-of-the-art, up-to-date cancer treatments that the world has to offer, but nothing could be further from the truth. Yeah. We're still treating our children with cancer medicines. They euphemistically call them medicines, but they're fucking poison. They were derived from mustard gas, a chemical agent deemed so inhumane, we don't even use it on our enemies of war, but this is our go-to medicines. But anyways, I digress. But I learned a lot about how shitty it is. We're still using medicines from the 1970s. Nothing is changing. Americans spend 20 times more money annually on potato chips than we do on childhood cancer research funding. We spend about the same amount of money every year on Halloween costumes for our pets than we do on childhood cancer research. It's about the same amount of money. If you could wrap your head around that. 1 or 2 pitchers in Major League Baseball sign contracts bigger than the entire budget for childhood cancer research. 1 or 2 pitchers. That's it. And I know you like baseball. I'm not bashing baseball. There's something very disproportionate about that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Between sports stars and actors and musicians, there's a love-hate relationship, because I love the product that they put out, but then I hate this pedestal and this I don't go with inequality. It's what the market demands.
Sure.
But there's a disconnect between what the country is going through and what people are making in some cases.
Right. And ultimately, I have no problem with somebody who can make $100 million a year. You're more than welcome.
I don't fault them. Yeah.
Yeah, where my problem comes in is then our children aren't worth shit in that comparison. You know what I mean? And that's where my mind. But anyways, I digress, and you don't have to stop because I will go down a lot of rabbit holes. But anyway, when she was going through her treatment, something really, really shitty happened, and they were administering this drug that is very common chemotherapy that they put into a cocktail for many different types of cancers. That's called doxorubicin. And doxorubicin has been nicknamed the Red Devil or the Red Death because it's red in color. It looks like Kool-Aid. So when they put it in the IV, it looks like they're putting Kool-Aid into your child's body. But the truth is that it's a very toxic chemical that has been proven to cause and have a toxic effect on the heart muscle. And that's what happened when they gave it to my daughter. Her heart stopped working. So they had to put a pacemaker defibrillator into her heart in the event that the treatment that they were using to save her life would try to kill her. Which ultimately it kind of does. It's this archaic balance of trying to kill the cancer without killing the patient. It's very insane. It's like treating our children with leeches in the scheme of things, especially when the Tesla drives itself. That's another conversation. But anyways, one day we were coming back from we were leaving the apartment on the way to the chemotherapy clinic, and something happened that definitely will haunt me for the rest of my days. Is that pacemaker defibrillator that they installed into my daughter's chest started malfunctioning, and it was shocking her inappropriately. So when you see on TV like somebody code blues and they hit them with those paddles, well, my daughter's heart was getting hit with these paddles that had been internally implanted into her chest because they thought that she was having a heart attack, which she was not. She was wide awake. So this thing is shocking her. Bam, bam. And she's screaming, "Help me, Dad, it's shocking me, it's shocking me." And, there's nothing I could do. I just wrapped her around my arms around and I held her as tight as I could. And shocking her, "Help me, Dad, it's shocking me, it's shocking me." And finally, it just stopped just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. And we rushed to the hospital. And it turns out, and I've mentioned this in one of my TEDx talks, it turns out they had to recall it, like brakes on a fucking Chevy. You know what I mean? And that was the course of our treatment. It was one shit show after another, and it's not unique. Like, I'm not unique. My daughter's case isn't particularly aggressive or particularly ugly. This is the norm for most children. They get mouth sores so bad they can't eat. Their genitals get sores and herpes from excreting the chemotherapies. Like, some parents have to wear protective clothing when changing their baby's diapers. And I'm sorry if I'm getting a little aggressive, but you invited me on your show. So
no, get aggressive. Because I know I talked to my friend whose 9-month-old child is just came out of surgery for removing the tumor, and he and I spoke about that, the fact that he had to glove up and gown up just to change Cal's diaper. And it affected him in such a way that he's like, I'm not going to do it. And we had to have that conversation where he's like, "No, you kind of need to do it, bud. I mean, it's you got to be ready to take care of him. And if you're not ready, who is going to take care of him?" So it's a necessity.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, it's a really horrific place for parents because we're not qualified for that shit.
No.
You know what I mean? We're not qualified for it. And not only do we have to do things like that, but we have to make these really harsh decisions for our children, all in the name of making them better. We have to agree to allow these doctors to pump this poison into their bodies, knowing the side effects, knowing that the odds and the likelihood. It's almost like torturing our own children in the name of making them better. And that causes some shit brain, and I've seen a lot of parents, whether their child survives or not, be plagued with PTSD and all kinds of things for years. I've seen a gazillion marriages fall apart. I've seen everything you can imagine since I've been doing this. But anyway, suffice to say, she had a tough battle like any kid with cancer will have. But it just never got better. Like, the cancer just, it looked like at one time it was shrinking, and then we went back for the next scan and it was back. And then we got to the point where, there's nothing more they could do, And so they asked me again, "Do you want to have this conversation with your daughter, or do you want us to have it?" And so I had to have it, right? That's not a conversation you get to pass off on anybody, unfortunately. No. So And I don't know that I would have passed it off. But anyway, so I sat her down and I want to tell you, and I'll be really careful how I say this, but it was not the conversation that I thought it was going to be. It wound up being a very sacred, beautiful, loving, wonderful conversation that I hope you never fucking have to have. You know what I mean? But we had that conversation and, you know, I had to tell my daughter that she was going to die. And that was a tough conversation. But I did it and we had that conversation. And then I'll skip ahead a little bit. So as a single dad, you know, I couldn't work because I was taking care of her all the time. Her mom had MS at that point. So her mom was really struggling with her own medical stuff.
Right.
And so I was trying to take care of Shayla, was trying to work. I was trying to, you know, put groceries on the table. And sometimes I was forced to get food from a food bank. Back in 2009, when my daughter was sick, there weren't nearly as many foundations and social media wasn't nearly as big as it is today. So there wasn't a lot of resources available to me. So there was, however, one foundation that helped us out and they gave us some money to help us with rent. But I'm such a proud father and a proud man that I insisted on paying it back, right? So they gave us like $1,600. And so when I was a kid, PG County, I used to box because you had to fight in PG County when you're a white kid. But I used to box at the gym, so I could throw a pretty good punch. I mean, I'm not Mike Tyson, but I could throw a straight punch. So anyway, I became a professional boxer at like 39 years old. And I fought 2 professional fights at Patriot Center in front of 10,000 people. It's a long story. It's not a long story. I got knocked out in the second round. But I raised $20,000 for that cancer foundation, and they gave me $1,600, and I gave them $20 grand to pay them back.
Nice.
And that was sort of the beginning of Stillbrave. That was the foundation and skeleton that would eventually become Stillbrave. My daughter was alive for the first fight, so she walked me to the ring. She passed away shortly after that fight. And so the second fight, I had a bunch of kids from cancer from the hospital walk me to the ring in her absence. But between that first and second fight, because I was a single dad, I had to run to the pharmacy one day to get a prescription for her. And so she was at home, she was in bed, she was on oxygen, you know, I made sure she had water, something to drink and everything. You know, she could text me if something went wrong. And I went to the pharmacy. Well, she got up to use the bathroom while I was gone, and I was only gone 10, 15 minutes. I called ahead, told them I was coming. But she fell when she was trying to get onto the toilet. And she got tangled up in her oxygen lines and she couldn't get up. And so when I came home, that's how I found her. And she was crying. You know, she was embarrassed. You know, she had soiled herself. I mean, it's tough to be a teenage girl, period. It's really hard to be a teenage girl going through some shit like that. You know, to have your father have to find you that way. But anyway, I picked her up and I cleaned her up and I washed her and I laid her back in the bed. And she looked at me and she had tears in her eyes. She said, "I'm still brave, Dad, right? I'm still brave." And then it dawned on me, man, this whole fucking time, she hadn't been being brave for herself. She'd been being brave for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's when I coined the phrase "still brave." And it's one word, not 2 words. It's one word.
Right.
Word. And still brave means to be brave for somebody else, not for yourself. It means you stay brave so somebody else can stay brave. You model for somebody else what it means to be brave, what it means to be empathetic, compassionate, and a human being. To be still brave is a great big deal. And a couple of days later, you know, my daughter lost her battle with cancer, but she fought bravely, and she took pretty goddamn good care of me, you know what I mean, in spite of it all. So that's sort of the nutshell, in a nutshell of how Stillbrave got started. During those candid conversations, before she died, she made me promise that I would help other families that were in similar situations. And she told me that if I did it, that she would hold my ass. So I'd love to see my daughter again, but I really don't want to be haunted. That shit would scare me.
No, not by a teenage girl. No, you don't want to be haunted.
Yeah, for real, right? So I started Stillbrave, and initially my plan was just to offer gas cards and grocery cards to families that were in tough situations. I had gone, through a grieving period, and I went back to work and had a full-time job. I was working and trying to pull the pieces back together, trying to pick up the pieces, just like that song I was listening to this morning.
Right.
Trying to pick up the pieces, and so I started doing that. I started giving gas cards and grocery cards to the clinics and the hospitals.
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
Well, something magical, for lack of a better word, happened. And it turns out that I'm really, really good at what I do. Like, who would have thunk it? I never would have thunk it. Kids with cancer love me. I'll lay on the floor with them. I'll play Barbies. I'll play Crazy Eights. They've never met anybody like me before in their life. Like, I'm this crazy cartoon character that they so desperately need, to bring some sort of something different to this situation that they're in, because kids aren't stupid. Kids can read everybody and everything. You know what I mean? And I'm sure if I were a kid and the same staunch doctors and the same staunch, I'm going to pray for you, people would come in, like, I'd be bored to tears, And so when I show up, I'm crazy, I'm wild, I'm loud, I'm colorful, I've got tattoos, I tell fascinating jokes, we lay on the floor, we have fun. So I'm really good at it. And then, all that stuff I was telling you about my stepdad, I know a lot of 4-syllable words, and so I became a public speaker, and I became a very aggressive, like I said earlier, unapologetic activist. You could find me in Congress. I was at the White House yelling and screaming. I actually stormed out of the White House during this meeting one time because I thought the answers they were giving were shitty, useless answers. And I found myself in the hallways of the White House, mad. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get shot. And I'm just walking around here screaming and cussing. Fortunately, I didn't get shot, but I was escorted out. And interestingly enough, I've never been invited back to talk about cancer at the White House. But that's fine because I don't want to sit through their bullshit canned answers about why our children are worth less money than potato chips. So I started, being very outspoken. I've done 3 TEDx talks about childhood cancer. I think I may be one of the fewest, maybe the only person in the country that's ever done 3 TEDx talks. Certainly the only person that's ever done 3 about childhood cancer. You can find all of those on YouTube. And I would encourage your listeners, if you'd like to understand and get more information about what's really going on, because chances are you're under the misconception, like a lot of Americans, that it's some sort of St. Jude commercial with smiling, bald-headed kids who go to Disney World and get better. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's anything but that. That's a big fat lie.
I've had, as I mentioned when we were starting, I had Loren on as a guest, and she talks very candidly about childhood cancer and some of the medicines. I'll use quotations because we both know it's poison. But she talks very candidly about it as well, being that it was the same medicine from the 70s and 80s that they pumped into her. And it's the same medicine from the 70s and 80s that they pumped into Marshall, who was also a guest, who also had childhood cancer, who happened to be in the hospital with Loren at the time. It's the same medicine that they're pumping into Cal. It's the same shit. And there isn't this push forward to save not just children, but anybody with cancer, because it's the same stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the disconnect somehow falls in the place because, some people do get better from this poison. And the reason is that it kills cancer cells, but it also kills healthy cells.
Yes.
And it also causes major side effects and secondary cancers. I just buried a little girl, one of the kids that I'm so close to. I just buried her because, her parents buried her because she had developed a secondary cancer from the treatment that cured the first cancer. And just a shout out while we brought her up. I love Loren. Loren is she's one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. We're like peas and carrots, me and that girl, man. I COVID caused a lot of people to have to do a lot of things. But prior to COVID, man, Loren and I were inseparable.
Right.
You know, we were in the hospitals and the clinics every day. She ran one of the ultra marathons with me. She ran a couple of ultra marathons to raise money. She's one of my favorite people in the entire world. And part of the reason that I so happily agreed to do your podcast, because she told me you were a solid dude. And if Loren tells me something like that, I'd take it to heart, because Loren, while I've been through some stuff with my daughter, Loren's been through some shit, because she recovered from, you know, what we just talked about. She went through that, you know, and they told Loren, like, I'm going to give a shout out to her story because it's wild. They told her mom that she might not live, and that if she lived, she might not walk. And that if she walked, she'd be handicapped. And nobody bothered to tell Loren because she's a damn firefighter now.
Right. What they failed to say was she might live, but be a firefighter.
Yeah, man. So while there is a lot of doom and gloom, you know, in my job and my stories, there's also, again, brings me back to the, you know, if you can find beauty even when it's not pretty. I mean, look at Loren. Loren is a true testament, somebody who beat the odds, you know, and came out swinging and went on to be this amazing person who not only has this amazing life for herself, but she gives back, you know, and she wants to help others. And she serves as my mentorship chairperson on my board of directors. And she mentors other young ladies and young men too, who are going through what she did. And she, you know, we all are a little bit hindered by the COVID restrictions that are still in place in the hospitals, because children with cancer are immunocompromised to begin with. So while the country has bounced back a lot from COVID, that's the one area that we're not quite as dialed in as we'd like to be, but we're hopeful and we're trying to push forward. But anyways, just a huge shout out to Loren. Loren, if you listen to this, I love you to pieces, and that's never going to change.
Well, I know that when I heard that Aaron, that's my buddy at work who I used to be on the same shift with, who's basically a brother to me. When I heard that he and his family were going through some childhood cancer because his son, the first person I reached out to was Loren, and she did not hesitate. She was in touch with him that day, that weekend, and she's been in touch with him ever since. And so I agree with you. I'll piggyback on what you had to say. She is one of the best people I know.
Yeah. She called me when that whole situation went down. She's like, I got this kid, you know, who I'm directly connected to. And I said, you have the credit card, do what needs to be done, you know, make sure those people have everything they need. And she was over there like the next day.
Yeah.
Like she was on it. So yeah, Loren's got a real heart for what's going on. And she's like, I can't say enough good things about her. I just can't.
Let's talk about what I think makes you the craziest person in the world.
Oh, is there only one thing?
There's the one thing that jumps out at me, like I said, no, that man's got some mental issues, ultra marathons.
Right.
Why are you doing them, and how are you doing them? What's your purpose? And what's next for you?
Okay. So just back up a little bit. When I was a boxer, you know, part of boxing was running. You have to run. It's called, you know, your road work. No boxer likes it. We hate it. You go out there and you run, but it helps to build your legs and helps to build your, you know, your cardio and stuff like that. But nobody likes it. We hate it. I have 2 or 3 t-shirts that say, I hate running. Running is stupid. Running sucks. I hate it. But there was this woman, and most of my crazy stories always start with, there's this woman that I was kind of seeing who talked me into running a marathon. It's a long story, but she talked me into running a marathon. And so I was like, oh yeah, baby, anything for you. And so I started training for this marathon. And then I got this idea, because at that time, Stillbrave was just in its infancy. And I got this idea that maybe I could run the marathon and see if I could raise money, you know, for general cancer, because I had raised so much money fighting. And so I started training for the race, and we started getting donations, and people were really on board. But unfortunately, about 3 weeks before the marathon was to take place, I broke my leg in 5 different places. I got like 5 class 4 stress fractures because I overtrained. You know, I didn't know how to run. I didn't know how to train for a marathon. And I was so aggressive that I just went out, ran 1,000,000 miles every day. That's apparently not how you train. You have to rest. Who knew, right? So I broke my leg in 5 places and couldn't run the marathon. But during that time off, the doctor, you know, put me in a cast, and I was on crutches. During that time off, we really got Stillbrave going. Like, I reached out to everybody who had donated, and I asked them if they wanted their money back, and nobody said they wanted their money back. So we took that money and we used it to buy business cards and websites And a good friend of mine, Julie, helped donate some money so that we were able to get our 501c process going. And during that time, we became an official 501c3. And the doctors told me to stay off of my leg for 8 weeks to give it some time to train. And then I could get off the crutches and go back to living my life. Well, about 4.5 months into it, I started training again. The crutches down and started training again. And then wasn't long after that I completed the Marine Corps Marathon and raised, I don't know, like maybe $10,000 for Stillbrave. And I finished it in a respectable 4-hour time, which is pretty good for an old dude who hates running.
Yeah.
But then it dawned on me, right? I had this friend who started talking to me about ultra marathons. And I was like, what the hell would somebody want to run an ultra marathon?
Right.
Or like marathon's brutal enough, right? Didn't the first guy that ran a marathon, like he died, back in Greece forever, right? Like, why would I want to run? But anyway, the next race after a marathon, in the ultra community that's respectable is considered a 50-mile race. So I was like, well, shit, if I raised 10 grand running the marathon, what could I raise running the 50-mile race? So I ran a 50-mile race and we raised like $25,000. And I was like, brain started churning again. I was like, well, damn, if I ran a 50-mile race and you raised $25,000, what could I possibly make if I ran a 100-mile race? And I at the time didn't even know there were 100-mile races that,
Right.
like the Marine Corps Marathon, 30,000 people sign up for that. Like a 50-mile race, it's like 1,000 people. And when you get to a 100-mile race, it's like 400 or 500 people. And then when you get to a 200-mile race, it's like 80 people. But anyway, so I ran the 100-mile race. And during that race, we got this idea. And that was to dedicate each of those 100 miles to a different child
Right.
who was either fighting cancer or had lost their battle to cancer. So I reached out via social media and I got inundated with 100 kids, like 2 days, like all the parents, particularly, I think when children die, parents' biggest fear is that their children are going to be forgotten.
Yeah.
And that happens. Like even your relative will stop saying their names and they become this like ghost and they're not, and that's the parents' biggest fear. So the race was all of a sudden, it was serving two purposes. The first purpose was to raise money so that we could continue the programs and services that Stillbrave was really starting to offer. And the second one was to bring new life or rebreathe life back into these children who had passed away. Because all of a sudden their parents had something to focus on, and the community that supported the children when they were going through treatment had something to put their time and energy back into. And then I would stop and I would read these children's stories and they'd read their names at every mile. And we would do like live feeds and Facebook feeds. And so it became this really cool, like reality TV show. And for some reason, the more I suffer, the harder it is for me, the more people donate. It's crazy. So anyways, we raised like $80,000 from this 100-mile race. And so I was like, fuck it, it's on. And I found out about this 200-mile race through around Lake Tahoe. And so I signed up for it and I ran and completed a 200-mile race and raised $236,000 during that race. And we can touch a lot of lives and we can help a lot of children and families with $236,000.
Yeah, you can.
And that race was so long and so difficult. And, I'm a slow runner, so I had to stay on my feet. Like a lot of runners, it's a timed race. But if you lay down to rest, that counts against your time.
You had to make up that time somewhere then.
Yeah. So if you have to be really careful, you'll get disqualified. So I was staying on my feet, man, and I was hallucinating and I was seeing shit that wasn't there. And we were televising that for everybody to see. And I had a GPS tracker so people could follow my progress. And apparently it became this really compelling thing. People would tell me later on that they get up in the middle of the night, check my progress on their phones, and the donations were coming in and the families were coming to meet me. Like families were driving 4 and 5 hours to meet me at different aid stations just to cheer me on. And man, this whole community thing just got big and there was energy and there was love and there was empathy and there was passion. And it was this amazing thing. And so that became our thing, and I've gone on to run many of those races. Unfortunately, because of that, because I'm old, I drove one of my hips into the ground and I had to have a hip replacement surgery back in June of 2022. But that's not going to stop because I'm signed up to run the Moab 240-mile ultra marathon in 2 months through the Moab desert. And if I finish it, I'll be the first person in history with a hip replacement to finish that race. And if I don't finish it, I'll still be a bad motherfucker for starting. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens, but excuse my language. When I'm in the clinics and hospitals with the kids, I don't cuss so much. So when I'm not around the kids, I'm kind of a potty.
Yeah, let it loose. I don't care. Everybody cusses on this show. Well, not everybody.
Yeah, so,
I've gotten through a few episodes without people cussing. I've blown away that I managed to not cuss.
Yeah, when I get excited, they're colorful adjectives. Yeah, I don't even think they're bad words. Colorful adjectives. But anyways, I've got 240 kids. I've got a wonderful team that's coming with me. One of my pacers, they allow you to have pacers with you to make sure when you're hallucinating that you don't fall off a cliff and stay on course. So one of my pacers is this wonderful young lady who lost both her brother and her sister to cancer. And my other pacer is a guy named Mike, whose daughter, Riley, is a childhood cancer survivor, which is awesome. She also likes punk rock and roll. She's a cool kid.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I've known her. She was going through treatment. And then my crew chief, the guy that's going to drive around and navigate us and get us from aid station to aid station, he's the father of the little girl, Katie, I just told you about, passed away from the secondary cancer. So I put together a team of very driven, passionate, provocative people to get us across this finish line. And we really hope that your listeners will go to stillbrave.org, click on the Moab 240 link and donate.
Yeah.
Think about how much money you spend on potato chips, kick down some potato chip money so that we can touch lives of children with cancer and their families. I'll run all the fucking miles. You guys can stay home and touch all the lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. And that definitely makes me crazy. That's one of a number of things, according to my ex-wife and my mother, but crazy nonetheless. And I'm fine with that, man. I'm fine with that. Maybe it's my crazy that makes me so valuable to the childhood cancer community, and I'm fine with that.
So what needs or what can be done to other than raising money? Because raising money is the big chunk of it. I understand that, but what kind of pressure can be applied? What kind of outcry can be made to start making some change?
Yeah, so that's the problem. I belong to a lot of organizations, and there are a lot of people who push and shove and try ad nauseum to get the government. Because I believe, let me give you an example. In the 80s, when the AIDS epidemic hit, at first it was just the gay community that was being exposed to it, right? So nobody really cared. There wasn't very much money being thrown at it. People have a lot of bigoted ideas about things. I'm not going to turn this into a political conversation, but the point I was trying to make is during that time, at first, when it was mostly the homosexual community that was being exposed to it, there wasn't any money being thrown at it. But later on, a lot of people started getting it. Magic Johnson got it.
I was going to say, when Magic came down, Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, the governments around the world were throwing billions of dollars at it, right? Because it was hitting too close to home for people. And so that amount of money, that amount of energy that was put in, all of the top scientists in the world, put all their time and energy in it. And while HIV and AIDS is not a walk in the park today, it's not a death sentence that it once was, right? In a lot of cases, it's a chronic illness that can be controlled with medicine, right? And the same thing happened. And again, I want to be really careful. I'm not trying to turn this into a political conversation, but when COVID hit, everybody freaked out because people were dying. So all the governments in the world threw all the money and their top scientists and their top doctors on it. And we came up with a vaccine. And again, not to have a political conversation. That's not what I'm doing. But that's what I'm saying needs to happen with childhood cancer. All the government and all the countries and all the top scientists and all of the doctors have to get on board and realize this is a problem. But the problem there, the disconnect is, and it's always going to be, is that there's no Magic Johnson with childhood cancer.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's not millions and millions of people. We don't all have to wear masks because of childhood cancer. But those are our children. Those are our future. They're more priceless to me than one basketball player. So that here lies the difference. So the constant disconnect is going to always be there. Unless you are personally touched by it, you don't want to think about it. The last thing you want to think about is your children dying, right? Who wants to fucking think about that, right? So you definitely, there's some survival flight or fight mechanism in your brain doesn't even let you think about it. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. I can't even tell you how weird it is. I mean, I've been doing this for over a decade and it's so weird. But there's one particular cancer called DIPG, diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. It's a terminal brain cancer. When a child gets it, that child will die. There is no treatment for that. In 1969, Neil Armstrong's daughter got that cancer. They gave her medicine to treat it, but she died. Today, if a little girl gets that same cancer, they're going to give her the same damn medicine that doesn't work, and she's going to die.
Right.
And where's the disconnect, and what do we do, and how do we change that? I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. But what I do know is I'm not going to quit fucking trying. I'm just going to keep what I tell you earlier, brother. I'm just going to keep showing up.
Right.
And I'm going to show up aggressive, and I'm going to show up unapologetic, and I'm going to be in their faces, and I'm going to keep screaming, and I'm going to keep running my body into the ground, whether I got to get another hip replacement, whether I got to do whatever I got to do, whether I got to get on a million podcasts. It's just going to be a question of I don't even know, but I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to keep showing up as long as they let me. And I can't give you an answer of what's going to fix it. I don't know. Maybe if Magic Johnson's daughter got cancer, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, man. But, we have a disproportionate amount of money going to, taxpayer dollars going to some really stupid fucking shit in this country right now. Yeah. And we're watching our children die. And that's a political conversation that I'm not afraid to have, because it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If that's okay with you, then your political party sucks.
Right.
I don't care. If you're okay, I go to the National Cancer Institute sometimes to protest. I go down there with a bullhorn, and I go down there with a podium, and I stick my podium up, and I scream and I yell, and they never come out, and they never talk to me. And I asked them to be, I had a podcast I was running for a while. I asked them to come on my podcast. They wouldn't. You know what? Because they're afraid. They're afraid to talk about it, because unfortunately in this country, all right, let me give you one last thing, and then I'll settle down. Remember I told you that my daughter's defibrillator was recalled, like
right.
brakes on a Chevy, right? Do you know what it takes for brakes on a Chevy to be recalled? It takes a whole bunch of people dying, right? The first couple of people that die, they don't recall them because it's not that big a deal,
right?
It has to be a huge thing, right? So it's the same thing, man. Like we have to get to a point where enough people are dying and enough children are dying, but at the end of the day, the National Cancer Institute and the government of the United States figures there's an acceptable amount of dead children that isn't worth the recall, that isn't worth the advancement. There's a cry that the childhood cancer community says all the time, is that childhood cancer isn't rare. Okay, it's not.
Right.
Like a lot of children get it. We lose the equivalent of 5 entire elementary schools of children to cancer every year.
Right.
It's not rare, but it's not as many kids die from it as kids die from other things, or adults die from things. So there is in this country an acceptable amount of deaths that are okay before people will act. When COVID first hit, there was an acceptable amount of deaths that took place before they started throwing money at it. When the AIDS epidemic hit, there was a certain amount of deaths that were acceptable until they started throwing money at it. When the brakes on a Chevy fail, there's a certain amount of fucking, deaths before it becomes a priority. That's the disconnect. That's what's wrong with this country. That's always going to be the case. And I don't know how to solve that, but like I say, I'm going to keep showing up, and I will continue to try to get those brakes recalled. Believe it.
So I got to ask you, how were the wings in the challenge?
That's a good segue to get away from. So look, man, those wings were wicked hot. I got to wing number 8, and that was the hottest thing I ever put in my body. It got me it was so hot. And it's weird because your body does the same kind of fight or flight thing, right? Like all these endorphins kick in and your body's like, dude, you're really screwing up right now. Stop this. And so by the time I got to wing number 8, it was so hot. I don't even remember wing 9 and 10, but we raised like $42,000.
Wow.
People just love to see me suffer, like I told you. But funny story, if you follow my social media, you may have seen this. So during that hot sauce psychosis, after wing number 8, I auctioned off my caboose, my butt, to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
And for the
unfortunately,
bidder,
I saw it.
Hey, for an old dude, I'm not convinced ain't that
there
bad.
you go.
So we got like $1,200, and a couple of days ago, I guess it was last week, I tattooed a couple of chicken wings and 3 people's names on my butt. But I auctioned off a part of my body. I've done it 4 or 5 times, the highest bidder. And it's a way to raise money. We raised like $30,000. I mean, you can't tattoo anything inappropriate, but I've got some cute tattoos. I'll tell you one fast story that we can end here because it's a cute story to get out of that aggressive politics.
By the way, I don't mind the aggressive politics. I just had to ask about the wings. I wasn't trying to get away from it.
I get it. Like I'll get worked up. It's probably not even good for my heart to get that worked up about it. You know? But anyways, so the very first time, I don't call me tattoo talk for nothing. So I got this idea, and I get tattoos sometimes. Like if a kid's gonna pass away, like that girl Katie that I just told you who passed away, whose dad's coming with me. I flew out to Seattle to spend some time with her before she passed away, and she drew this. I don't know if you can see it, but she drew this kitty cat tattoo.
Okay.
And we went to the kitty cat cafe, and she drew this picture, and then we went and got it tattooed. And I told her, you know, no matter what happens, from now on, you're always going to be a part of me.
Right.
And I've done that for probably 5 or 6 different kids. I have tattoos all over my body that kids drew for me. But I got this idea that I was going to auction off my body, and then I was going to make a ton of money, like McDonald's or Apple or somebody was going to give me like $300,000 to tattoo their logo on. Like I had delusions of grandeur, I guess, right? Well, it turns out that didn't happen. But the very first tattoo auction that I did, this little girl named Tara, who was a brain cancer survivor, she put on lemonade stands and car washes, and her friend canvassed all their parents and all their parents' friends for money. And she raised over $3,000. And she won the right to tattoo anything she wanted on my body. This crazy ass kid made me get a cat. Let me say I didn't say it. A kitty cat, butterfly, unicorn, standing on a softball, farting rainbow gas. That's my Princess Tara made me get. So I have that tattoo on my.
So she knows. So she knows you well.
She does, man. She's a cool kid, man. She just when she was going through treatment, she was, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 years old, maybe. And but she loved me, and I would spend time with her at the clinic. There's a great story about this princess event that we put on for her. But anyway, I promised her way back then. I said, if you ever turn 18, or I didn't say it like that, but I said, when you turn 18, if you want to get a tattoo, I got you. Well, 10 years later, a couple of months ago, she turned 18 against all odds.
Right.
And I took her to the tattoo shop and made good on my promise and got her first tattoo.
Awesome.
One of the best days of my life.
Yeah, of course it is.
Love stories that end like that. And then, you know, there's a lot of sadness in what I do, and I lose a lot of kids, and it's heartbreaking. There's a lot of really great stories. There's a lot of survivors. Unfortunately, oftentimes those survivors are plagued with, you know, chronic side effects and secondary cancers, and their life isn't always easy, but they still have a life and they're still alive. And I don't know that I play any big part of that. But I know that I want to play a big part of that. And I know that I'm super duper grateful that I get to be a part of that.
Well, here's a question for you then. Going on talking about survivors. When I talk to Marshall and Loren to a fair extent as well, Marshall talks about this, well, definitely a PTSD from the cancer, but this dread every year, you know, when he for a long time and maybe to a degree still today is just waiting for the return of cancer. And so is your foundation, how do you approach that with kids?
So that's a reality. And, you know, there are cases of children and adults, of course, going 5, 10, 15 years, and then all of a sudden the cancer comes back. So it's something that they're going to live in fear of. Like you can't, how could you not?
Right.
You know, it's a reality. And that's a sad, scary place. So what I do notice though, is there's a lot of kids who are able to compartmentalize that in such a way that they really start living for the moment. You know, they become very, very mindful of how important it is to stay in the here and now. And that's the whole trick. Any major religion since the dawn of religions, the one common denominator they have besides love everybody is, you know, stay in the moment, be present, be mindful. You know, all we have is this moment. So a lot of children and adults even are able to do that. But as far as survivorship goes, there's 2 things that plague a child, you know, once they become, let's say 5 years and they're considered cured. And the first one is, of course, that the cancer might come back. And the second one is they get this guilt feeling because all of their friends have died
right.
and they're still alive and they don't understand why.
Yeah.
So Stillbrave, when you become a Stillbrave kid, that's a lifelong thing. Like we don't ever stop contacting them. I take kids out to dinner who are survivors on a regular basis. I've got friends that are now, one girl, Serena, who I loved to death. I started hanging out with her when she was a teenager. She just graduated with some crazy master's degree in art therapy so she can help kids with cancer. And she calls me on my birthday and she tells me that she loves me and we go out to dinner. And if she were ever to need anything for any reason, I would do it. I wouldn't even ask any questions. So survivorship and moving forward is something that Stillbrave is very, very aware of and very concerned about. And Loren, she works for us and she helps to fill some of that need, because if we do get somebody that calls or we make a connection, she can sort of talk to them, and she will. She'll call them. She'll go out to dinner with them. She'll model for them, how to live a meaningful life in I wouldn't say how to shake that fear, because you never can really shake it, but how to live your life in spite of that fear, right? And she's a perfect example of somebody who's done that. Serena is another example. So I make those connections when I can with children, to make sure that they have a network and they have a foundation and they have other people. But I also field phone calls at 3:00 in the morning, from kids who are scared and they're crying and they don't know what to do. And I just listen, I just listen. And I'll listen for hours and hours and hours. That's what it takes. When you become a Stillbrave kid, that's a lifelong relationship. And we, even if Stillbrave were to dissipate and never not be a foundation anymore, as long as I'm alive, like I would never forsake or forget those children. And so, I mean, I know that's maybe, I don't know exactly what answer you wanted, but there's important to us in the survivorship phase of their life as they are in the treatment phase, every bit.
So I've got two more things from Stillbrave specifically I want to talk about. First is, you mentioned it kind of at the beginning with Billy Strings, the Two Feather Society, correct?
Right.
So explain that. Explain the purpose behind it, because that's a little bit I guess it's a little separate from Stillbrave, but it's still related.
It's separate. Yeah, it's separate and related. It's just this cool thing that I came up with a friend of mine. And basically what it boils down to is, I told you about these silver bracelets that my daughter and I shared. So I get close to kids, pretty close to kids. Like, I always walk into the hospital and I'm like, not this time. It's all business. Don't let them look at you. Just tell them this is all business. And then I go in and they bat their eyes at me and I'm like, oh, let me buy you a pony. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, so I get particularly close to a kid and I'd buy them one of these silver bracelets to show them how much I love them. It's the greatest gift I can give you. If I ever give you a silver bracelet, that means I love you more than I love anybody ever. Because the first person that I gave that bracelet to was my daughter. Yeah. So there are a handful of people that I've given that bracelet to. And if I had $1 million to give you, to me, giving you $1 million wouldn't be as valuable as if I gave you one of these bracelets. So anyway, I started giving the bracelets to kids that I got close to. But the problem is that the bracelets are very expensive. They cost like $200-$300 a piece, right? So this friend of mine told me about these feather rings. I don't know if you can see them, but these little sterling silver feather rings. So it was a kind of a weird process that happened, but we came up with this idea. And what we do is we give the kids a feather ring and they become a member of the Two Feather Society. And the requirement to become a member of the Two Feather Society is that you have to promise that you will do a minimum of 5 random acts of kindness to help somebody else, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You can buy somebody a cup of coffee. You can help your mom with the dishes, whatever the case may be. But then there was a secret component to it. And up until this point, it's been very secret, but I don't mind sharing it with you now because we're hoping that this thing is going to explode. But the beauty and the magic and the wonder of this society is that when the kids are in the hospital, Jimmy might go home for a while. He's feeling better. Then he could get sick again and have to be rushed back to the hospital. Katie might still be in the hospital. So when Jimmy and Katie see each other, they're glad to see each other. They're best friends. They see each other in the hospital. They play, they color together, whatever. Well, here's the thing. The ring is so important. It binds these kids together. So what the kids do is they'll take their ring off and they'll exchange it for the other kid's ring. And the idea behind that is you take on the hardships, you take on the burdens, you take on the fear of the other kids, and then you give them your good energy and your good juju, right? And so I've got rings that have been circulated like 40, 50 kids. We have over 350 members of our club. And so as the club was building, it was just kids with cancer. And then I'd invite a nurse to join, or I'd invite a sibling to join. And then it just got weird. I would meet like some person on the street. Like I met this woman who was dressed up in an orca outfit, like a killer whale, like a furry outfit. And everybody was walking past her like she was a crazy person. But because I have no boundaries, I walked up to her and I was like, what the hell are you doing out here in a killer whale out? And she went on to tell me, I don't know if you remember this story about this killer whale whose baby had died.
Yes.
And mom was so grief stricken that she pushed it around the ocean.
Yeah.
So this woman was a whale conservationist who was out there dressed in a work outfit to talk about love. That's the only reason she was out there, exposing herself to the ridicule of the passersby, only because she wanted to talk to them about love. So I was like, girl, I want you to join my club. So I keep an extra ring on my finger at all times. And so I gave her a ring and she's in my club. And then I started getting famous people to join. Zach Wilde, who's Ozzy Osbourne's guitar player. I met him. He's in. Billy Strings is in, one of my favorite people. Billy Strings is sound man. Daniel Donato, a famous guitar player. I've got best-selling New York Times authors in the club. I've got all these clubs. So when I let a kid in the club, I'm able to say to him, look, this guy's in and that guy's in, this guy's in. It's a super cool club. And we also take and we write. I have a friend, Kristen, who keeps a leather-bound journal. And when anybody gets inducted into the Two Feathers Society, she writes their name in calligraphy in this book. So that when the archaeologists find it 1,000 years from now, they'll know who we were. So that's the Two Feathers Society. There's two ways to get in. The first and most esteemable way, I guess you want to say it like that, is for me to personally induct you.
Right.
Like for me to take a ring off my finger and let you in, you get a special hieroglyphic next to your name if that's how you get. But also because we want more people to live an empathetic, compassion-filled life of taking care of one another, we do offer a membership, a lifetime membership that includes the ring, the t-shirt, and you get your name in the book. If you go to twofeathersociety.org, it's a little secret offshoot website. It's not part of Stillbrave's website directly, but it's a way that if you wanted to, or your listeners wanted to, they could join this club. And it's $100 donation that we use to support our programs and services. But you get a sterling silver ring and a t-shirt and some stickers and shit. I mean, it's a bargain, twice that price.
Right.
You know that? Plus, the kids love it. And the stronger we get, and the bigger the club gets, the more excited the kids get to be a part of it. And if any famous person should happen to hear this podcast, you know, we'd love to have you in because you would help to motivate these kids and make these kids feel more important and more valued and more seen and more heard. And that's what I want.
Perfect. That's you obviously explained it better than I could ever do. And that's why I asked. I love it. Thank you.
Sure.
The last thing about Stillbrave is your Christmas auction coming up, or your Christmas raffle. How do you term it? I'm sorry, I'm destroying it for you.
Okay, no worries. So pre-COVID, every year we used to put on the Rock and Renegade Holiday Extravaganza. Okay, and what that is, it's a concert that we put on. So there are a lot of childhood cancer foundations, and I don't begrudge anybody any way that they raise money. It's completely cool. It's completely fine. Everybody has a certain demographic that they want to attract. Some cancer foundations will have bingo nights or golf tournaments or tea parties or things like that. But we're renting. We'll do it like that. Right. So we have punk rock concerts. And once a year we put on the Rock and Renegade, where we bring out these bands and it's rock and roll and it's punk rock and it's shots of tequila and it's tight skirts and leather jackets. And we have a silent auction. And it's a way for parents like myself who really don't want to play golf to come out and have fun and do something to cut loose and forget about life for a while, you know? And so we had not put one on because COVID hemmed this up for a couple of years. So this year on December 2nd at Jam and Java in Vienna, Virginia, we're bringing back Rock and Renegade Extravaganza. It'll be concerts. There'll be free food. There'll be drink specials. There'll be rock and roll. We're also going to have silent auctions. So if you want to donate an item to our silent auction, whether it's a gift basket or vacation property or gift cards or anything that you want to value that you want to donate, please send me an email. My email address is tom.mitchell, MITCHELL @stillbrave, STILLBRAVE.org. And that's my personal email. I personally will respond to every email that you send me, whether it's related to the silent auction or whether it's related to a child that you have in treatment for cancer, or whether it's related to something that you're dealing with as a person. I will respond to each and every email. It would take me all night. I read my emails every day and I respond to each and every one. But we would love to have you show up at the event to buy a ticket. Tickets will be going on sale soon. Stay tuned to my social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Mostly, I do most of my business on Facebook just because I'm old, and that's the only one that I can really understand completely. So I don't have a TikTok yet, but I've got a Facebook that keeps things pretty up to date. So you can friend me or follow me on Facebook, and you can watch. I post, if you follow me on social media, I post ad nauseam. I'm always posting something. And this is going to be a super fun event. Like, you got to come out, and this is rock and roll for kids with cancer. This ain't no bullshit. This ain't your daddy's office party. You know what I'm saying?
It's funny because as you were talking, I multitask because I had that ADD that goes on and goes through my body. I multitasked and made sure I just got the day off after, because I was supposed to work the day after. So I'm supposed to work on the 3rd, but I just put in for vacation. So I'll be there on the 2nd. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Make sure you get in touch with me because I make sure you get tickets. The event will sell out.
Okay.
It's a smaller venue and it will sell out. So get in touch with me.
Oh yeah, Jam and Java is a very cool venue. Actually, it's a very venue. Small venue, and you want to talk about intimate, and it's intimate.
Yeah,
it's
it's gonna be fun.
I have a funny story, and I'm gonna put my buddy on blast for a second here. We went, and, John R. Miller.
Yes.
All right, we went and saw John Miller there, and
Yes.
I forgot who the opener was, but my buddy came out, and I'm not going to put his name out there, but some people are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. He came out, and at intermission, I went and used the bathroom, and so he followed, and he went and used the bathroom right after me, and came out, and he sat down next to me. He goes, "Well," and he looks around, he goes, "Yeah, I definitely took a poop in the women's bathroom." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, I guess it was the wrong bathroom." I said, how'd you get in there, use the bathroom, come out without getting caught? He's like, "I don't know, but I did. I definitely went in the wrong bathroom." So he knows who I'm talking about. He'll listen and he'll get a laugh about it.
That's so funny because I went there just a couple of days ago to sign the contract and do the final walkthrough and everything. And I had to use the bathroom. And I've been there many times, but I had to use the bathroom, and they're not clearly marked on the doors as clearly as they should. They're not. So in fairness to your buddy, I can see how he made that mistake because I popped my head in to look for a urinal just to be sure I was walking into the right.
Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah, that could happen.
He just came out. He's like, "Yeah, I definitely took a shit in the women's bathroom," and I just like, "Well, that's you, buddy. I don't know what to say about that." One more question for you. This is for a good friend of mine who I worked with, and I've known for about 9 years now. And since you're a boxer, I have to get this out because I want to float something by you. He's 6'4", about 250, and he swears he could avoid Mike Tyson for 6 rounds. And I told him he's crazy. There's no way you can avoid Mike Tyson for 6 rounds.
Why does he think that? Because he's big?
Yeah, he thinks he can do the put the hand on the forehead thing and hold him at bay at least and run from us. No,
Mike Tyson will come under and give him an uppercut that'll knock him back to second grade.
Hey, we're all trying to bring him down to earth and inform him that's impossible, but he swears he can do it. So I just wanted to bring. So now you're a former professional boxer right here is telling me that you can't do it.
Even Mike Tyson at his age today would break that poor man to a million pieces. Let me tell you a quick thing that we used to say. You play baseball, you play soccer, you play tennis, you don't play boxing.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's a science. It makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's get.
Believe me, I was a pro boxer, but I wasn't a very good one. I couldn't avoid Mike Tyson to save my life. If your buddy, I don't care how big, he's just big. If he's that big, he's probably slow as shit. And Mike Tyson would break him in a million pieces, and even at his age today.
Yeah, I just had to bring it up. It came to me when you were talking about boxing, so I was like, yeah, let's talk about it at the end. So let's get to my
deflate that.
We'll get to my last 2 questions, and the first one is about an everyday carry. What's something that if you left home without, you feel naked?
My feather bracelet.
Yeah, I figured it was gonna be that or tattoos. So I figured I had to bring.
My tattoos still have here with me.
Right,
but my feather bracelet, it's rare that I don't have it on. Occasionally, I won't wear it, but it's very rare that I don't have it on. If I'm going out, or I'm doing a podcast, or I want to talk about something, I have it on. This is the one thing that gives me that energy, that connectedness to my daughter. And I promised her that I would wear it until she was better, and she's not better, so I have to keep that promise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would sell my house, but I wouldn't sell my bracelet.
I got you.
Even if you were going to give me the same amount of money for both.
Right.
Wouldn't do it.
Well, you can't replace sentiment.
Right.
All right. What about a book? I know you said you got up before we started recording. You said, I got the perfect book. I'll hold it up so everybody can see. Tell me about your book.
So this is a book from my childhood. I have a friend right now, this old buddy of mine. He's this old dude. and he's in the hospital. He's not doing very good. And so he can't talk and everything. So I've mostly been going up to visit him, and I wanted to sit and read with him. And I couldn't find the right book. So when I was a kid, the very first big boy book that I ever read, the very first chapter book that I ever read was Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Okay.
By Rich Bob. And a lot of people don't understand how Tattoo Tom's brain works or what motivates me. So there's two easy ways to find out what motivates me and what I've modeled myself after or what influenced my life. The first would be to read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and the second would be to watch the movie Billy Jack. You'll see a guy behind me in a cowboy hat with a rifle. In the 1970s, there was a movie that came out called Billy Jack. So if you watch Billy Jack and you read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, a lot about Tattoo Tom will start making a whole lot more sense for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Thank you for spending 90 minutes with me this morning and kind of opening up and telling us what you're about and what Stillbrave is about.
Right on. I appreciate you having me. And then just another quick shout out. You can find us on social media. You can find me personally, Tom Mitchell. You can also find Stillbrave Childhood Cancer Foundation on all the social media platforms. Our website, stillbrave.org, and twofeatherssociety.org if you would be so inclined as to want to join our sacred brethren sistren. And that gift makes a wonderful holiday gift as well. Kids love it. People love it. It's a great gift.
That's perfect. I appreciate it, sir. It's a pleasure kind of meeting you, even though it's virtual. Someday we'll catch up in person, and I'll thank you.
For sure. Hopefully I'll see you at Rock and Renegade.
Of course.
Come, bro.
There you go.
Fun.
Go enjoy the rest of your day, my friend.
Thank you very kindly. You have a great day. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Take care, sir. We're out.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.